My name is Rachel Doyle. I am 32 years old, and on Christmas night my parents locked me out of their house in the snow and would not let me back in for so much as a coat. I stood on the porch with my purse on my shoulder and nothing else, and through the gap in the door my mother said the things she had been saying my whole life. "You can't do anything on your own, Rachel. You're desperate." Behind her, my brother Cody pulled the curtains shut in what used to be my room. The next morning, I drove to the bank to use an old card my grandfather had left me years earlier, just hoping for enough money for gas and a cheap motel room for one more night. The manager swiped it, looked at her screen and went white. "Ma'am," she whispered. "Please sit down. You need to see this." 48 hours later, my mother was not the one giving orders anymore. This is the story of what was on that screen, how it got there, and why the woman my family spent a lifetime calling desperate turned out to be the only one in that house who was actually paying for anything. If you have ever been called helpless by the very people who were quietly leaning on you the hardest, stay right here, because what that bank manager found changes everything. I want to clear something up right away because my mother spent years telling a different version of events. I was not living in my parents' house because I had failed at life. 3 months before that Christmas, I had taken a job as an emergency room nurse at the hospital in my hometown. I had moved back from the city for it. The apartment I wanted would not be available until February, and my first hospital paychecks were still clearing. So I asked my parents if I could stay in my old room for a couple of months to save on a deposit. That is it. That is the entire shameful story of my dependence. A grown woman with a full-time job in the hardest department in the building, sleeping in her childhood bedroom for 8 weeks to be smart with money. I am the kind of person who plans, who handles the crisis without making it about herself, because that is literally my job, and it is also just who I am. I do not ask people for things. I figure things out. That sounds like strength, and most days it is. But I have learned since then that it is also the thing that made me an easy target, because if you never ask for help, the people around you decide you do not need any, and some of them decide that out loud, and a few of them decide it while quietly helping themselves to what is yours. I did not know that last part yet on that Christmas. I just knew I was a 32-year-old ER nurse being treated like a burden in the house where I grew up, and I could not figure out why 2 months of being financially responsible had turned me into the family disappointment. The answer was sitting on a screen at a bank, and it had been there for years. The temperature in that house had a pattern, and the pattern was Cody. My brother is 4 years younger than me, and from the time he was born, he was the one my mother worried about, watched over, arranged the whole household around. There was always a reason. He had been a premature baby. He had a hard time in school. He lost a job, then another, then a third. Every setback became more evidence that Cody needed protecting, and I, who handled my own setbacks without an audience, became evidence of something else. I became proof that some children just do not need their parents. My mother said it like a compliment, and meant it like a dismissal. "Oh, Rachel's fine. Rachel can take care of herself." She would wave me off like a fly while clearing a path through the world for my brother. Those first weeks back home, I watched it up close for the first time as an adult. Cody, 28 and unemployed again, getting his car payment handled. Cody getting a cheque pressed into his hand at the dinner table. And me, the working nurse, getting reminded that I was lucky they were letting me stay. One evening my mother said it plainly, the first small version of the line that would eventually define everything. I had offered to help with grocery money since I was eating their food, and she patted my hand and said, "Don't worry about it. You can barely take care of yourself. You can't do anything on your own anyway." I let it go. I always let things go. I was good at letting things go, which, it turns out, is exactly the quality a thief looks for in a victim. The card in my purse came from my grandfather. My mother's father, Leo Marsh. Pop Leo, I called him. He died 6 years ago, but he gave me that card 14 years before that, on the day I graduated high school. He took me out for pie, just the two of us, and slid an envelope across the diner table. Inside was a debit card with my name on it, attached to an account he had opened for me, and he had put a real amount in it to start, enough to mean something. He told me it was for my future, for school, for emergencies, for the day I would need to stand on my own 2 feet, and then he did something I did not understand at 18. He took a paper napkin, wrote on it, folded it into a little square, and tucked it behind the card in my wallet. "Keep this with the card," he said. Don't read it now. Read it the day you need it. Then he looked at me, completely serious, and added one thing out loud. And Rachel, don't tell your mother about this account. She'll spend it. I laughed because I was 18, and I thought he was being a grumpy old man about his own daughter. I tucked the napkin away and mostly forgot about it. I used the account a little in college, then less, then not at all once I had a nurse's salary. Years went by. The card went soft and scratched in the bottom of my wallet, just an old thing I never threw away. I had no idea I was carrying a loaded warning folded into a square the entire time. Pop Leo died 6 years ago, and my mother handled everything. She was his power of attorney near the end, managing his money, his bills, his accounts. After he passed, she managed the estate and the paperwork. I was 26 and grieving and living in the city, and I was glad someone was handling it, and that someone was his own daughter. So why would I question it? At the funeral, I asked her gently whether Pop had left anything, any little keepsake or note, because he had been the one person who really saw me. She looked me right in the eye and said, "Oh, honey, your grandfather didn't have much at the end. There wasn't really anything to leave. Don't go getting your hopes up about an inheritance." I believed her. She was my mother, standing at her own father's funeral. The idea that she would lie to me there then about that never entered my mind. So I let go of the thought of any gift from Pop Leo, tucked the old scratched card away, and assumed the account had long since been closed or emptied. That single sentence at the funeral, "There wasn't really anything to leave," was the cornerstone of everything that came after. It was the lie that kept me from looking, and it worked for 6 years. Living back in that house 3 months before Christmas, I started noticing money I could not explain. Cody did not work steadily, but Cody had things. A newer truck appeared in the driveway. Old debts that my mother used to whisper about seemed to evaporate. There was a vacation, a deposit on an apartment for him and his fiancée, a watch. I am not nosy by nature, but I am an ER nurse, and the job trains you to notice when the story does not match the chart. The story was that my parents were comfortable but careful retirees on a fixed income. The chart was a 28-year-old with no job buying a truck. One evening I asked lightly, "Where's Cody getting the money for all this?" My mother's face did something I would see again later, a quick flicker before the smooth mask came back. "That's family business, Rachel," she said. "It's being handled." I let it go because that is what I do, but it lodged somewhere in the back of my mind like a small wrong note. Then, in early December, my mother announced the plan that would put me on a porch in the snow. Cody and his fiancée Brielle were going to move in. They needed a place while they got on their feet, and the place they needed was my room, the room I had been promised through February. My mother delivered it like good news. "It just makes more sense, Rachel. You're so independent. You'll land on your feet anywhere. Cody and Brielle really need the stability." There it was again, my competence weaponized against me. Cody's helplessness had earned him a home. My capability had earned me an eviction. I tried to be reasonable. I explained the apartment was not ready until February, that I just needed the 8 weeks, that I would be out the second I could. My mother's face hardened. "Don't be dramatic. You'll figure it out. You always do." Looking back, I understand why she was so eager to get me out of that house, and it had nothing to do with Cody needing a room. I was getting too close, noticing the trucks and the watches and the money that did not add up. A daughter sleeping down the hall might start actually looking. She needed me gone before that happened, and Christmas gave her the excuse. Christmas dinner was a performance, and I was cast as the cautionary tale. The table was full, aunts, uncles, cousins, and my mother spent the meal narrating Cody's bright future, the engagement, the apartment, the fresh start. When the conversation drifted to me, it drifted down the way it always did. "Rachel's still finding herself," my mother told the table, though I had a job, a plan, and a pension. "We're letting her stay with us while she sorts things out." After dessert, my father disappeared into the den, which is what my father does when something hard is about to happen, and my mother followed me into the kitchen. "We think it's best if you go tonight," she said. Just like that, tonight, Christmas night. I asked if I could at least stay until morning, pack my things properly. "Cody and Brielle are coming in the morning. And honestly, Rachel, the longer you drag this out, the harder you make it. You need to learn to do things on your own." I went to get my bags and she stopped me. Said they would send my things later, that I should just go, that I was making it a production. So I left with my purse and my coat and nothing else. My mother stood in the doorway with the warm light behind her and said it, the whole sentence, the one I will hear in my head forever. "You can't do anything on your own, Rachel. You're desperate." Then she shut the door and I heard the lock turn. I sat in my car in their driveway for a while, engine running for the heat, snow filling the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. My hands were shaking and not from the cold. But I am an ER nurse, and the job has taught me one genuinely useful thing. When everything goes wrong at once, you do not get to fall apart. You triage. I had maybe $60 cash, a quarter tank of gas, and a credit card near its limit. I went through my wallet under the dome light looking for anything, and my fingers found the old card. Pop Leo's card, soft-edged, the numbers half worn off. And tucked behind it, a little folded square of paper I had not touched in 14 years. I did not open the napkin that night. I was too tired and too cold. But I held that card and thought, maybe there is $20 left on it. Maybe enough for a motel? My mother had said Pop left nothing, and I had believed her for 6 years, so I was not expecting a miracle. I was expecting bus fare. I found a cheap motel off the highway, paid cash for one night, and decided that first thing in the morning, I would take that old card to the bank and see if my dead grandfather could buy me one more night indoors. That decision changed my entire life. The bank was a small credit union on Main Street, the kind with one teller window and a manager's desk in the open. I got there when it opened, running on no sleep and motel coffee. I slid the old card across the counter and gave an embarrassed little laugh. This is really old. It might be closed. I just want to check the balance, maybe take out whatever's on it. The teller swiped it, frowned, swiped it again. Then she said, "Let me get my manager," in a voice that made my stomach drop because I know that voice. It is the voice nurses use in the hallway when they do not want to say the bad thing in front of the patient. The manager came over, a calm woman named Joan Pruitt, and she pulled up the account and I watched her face change. She read something, scrolled, read more. The colour went out of her cheeks. She glanced at me, then back at the screen. Then she lowered her voice the way you do when you are about to hand someone news that is going to hurt. "Ma'am," she said, "please sit down. You need to see this." I sat. My heart was doing the thing it does in a trauma bay, that slow, heavy pounding. I braced for empty. I thought, here it comes. The account has been drained, there is nothing, my mother was right. This is the final humiliation of the worst week of my life. What Joan turned the monitor to show me was not empty. It was full of years of activity, and not one transaction in that long scrolling list had been made by me. The account my grandfather had opened for me, the one my mother swore at his funeral did not exist, the one I had assumed was closed or emptied, was still open, still in my name. And it had been used as a piggy bank for years, dozens of withdrawals and transfers going back before Pop Leo died, and continuing for years after. Regular amounts, sometimes large ones, and the destination for every single transfer was right there in the bank's record, an account belonging to Sharon Doyle, my mother. The grandfather who had handed me a card and a warning had put far more into that account over the years than I ever knew, building something for me. And my mother had been quietly bleeding it out the entire time. I sat in that chair and did the thing the job trained me to do. I did not scream and I did not cry. I asked questions. These withdrawals, I didn't make any of these. Who authorised them? Joan pulled up more detail, and her careful answer told me everything. For years the access had been tied to a power of attorney, an old authorisation from my grandfather's affairs. "But Miss Doyle," she said slowly, "this account is in your name. You're the owner. And these transactions, especially the more recent ones, the ones after the date you're telling me your grandfather passed away." She stopped. She did not have to finish. The woman who called me desperate, who said I could not take care of myself, who needed to learn to stand on my own, had been standing partly on my money for years. Joan was kind and precise and walked me through it like a professional. The account was mine, solely mine. My grandfather had set it up that way with me as the only owner. My mother had access through her power of attorney over my grandfather's separate affairs, and somewhere along the way that access had bled into an account that was never hers to touch. "Here's what I'd recommend," Joan said. "We can print your full statement history, You'll want to review every transaction and identify which ones you didn't authorize. And given the pattern and the dates, you may want to file a fraud claim and speak with an attorney. Some of these transactions may be recoverable. Recoverable. I held on to that word. I asked her to print everything, every page going back as far as the system held. While the printer ran, I sat very still and let the ER nurse in me take over from the daughter. The daughter wanted to drive to my parents' house immediately. The nurse made a list. Get the statements. Identify the fraud. Find a lawyer. Document everything. Stay calm, because the calm person in the crisis is always the one who controls it. Sitting in that motel room with the statements spread across the bed, I finally understood the whole machine my mother had built. It started with the lie at the funeral. There wasn't really anything to leave. That sentence was not grief. It was a lock on a door. As long as I believed Pop Leo had left nothing, I would never check the account. And as long as I never checked, she could keep drawing from it. She had the means because near the end of his life, she had been his power of attorney, handling his money and his bills. That authority was real while he was alive. But here is the thing I learned. The thing that turned my family grievance into a legal case. A power of attorney ends the moment the person dies. The instant Pop Leo passed, any authority my mother had through that document was gone. Completely. Automatically. By law. Every withdrawal she made from my account after his death was not a grey area or a family loan. It was unauthorised. And the account she was pulling from was not even his. It was mine. So she had been taking money that belonged to me, using an authority that had died with her father, for years, while telling me I could not take care of myself. The audacity of it was staggering. But there is a clarity that comes when cruelty turns out to be that clean, that documented, that provable. I was not dealing with a feeling anymore, a flicker on a face, a wrong note. I was dealing with a paper trail. And a paper trail is something an ER nurse who charts everything knows exactly how to respect. I stacked the statements neatly. I circled the transactions after the date of my grandfather's death, and then I reached for my wallet, because there was one piece of evidence I still had not read. I took the little folded napkin out from behind the old card, the one Pop Leo had tucked there 14 years ago, and told me not to read until the day I needed it. The paper had gone soft and yellow, the folds nearly worn through, but his handwriting was still there. That careful slanted print I would know anywhere. For when you have to stand on your own, it read. This is yours, Rachel. Nobody else's. Don't tell your mother about it because she'll spend it, and she'll have a good reason every time. Some people love you and steal from you in the same breath. Protect yourself. Love, Grandpa Leo. I sat on the edge of that motel bed and read it 3 times, and the 3rd time my hands were steady. He had warned me on a folded napkin when I was 18. He had known his own daughter well enough to predict 14 years in advance exactly what she would do, and he had tried to build a wall around me with a debit card and a paper square and a secret. The only thing he had gotten wrong was thinking I would read the note in time. I had not. I had trusted my mother instead, the way children do, right up until she locked me out in the snow. But the note was not just heartbreak. It was evidence of intent. It proved the account was meant for me alone, that my grandfather had explicitly excluded my mother, that there was nothing accidental or familial about what she had been doing. Pop Leo, 6 years gone, had reached forward in time and handed me the cornerstone of my case. I found a lawyer named Tom Avery, an estate and elder law attorney 2 towns over, and I brought him the statements and the napkin and the dates. He listened the whole way through without interrupting, which is how you know someone is actually thinking. When I finished, he set down his pen. Ms. Doyle, I want to make sure you understand how strong this is, because people in your position often think they have less than they do. He laid it out plainly. The account was mine, solely and demonstrably. My grandfather's power of attorney, whatever it had once allowed, had terminated the instant he died, automatically by law, no exceptions. Every transfer my mother made out of my account after that date was unauthorised. Full stop. This isn't a misunderstanding between family members, Tom said. This is conversion. Possibly criminal. At minimum, you have strong grounds to demand the funds back, and the credit union's own fraud process may reverse some of it directly. He tapped the napkin in its little plastic sleeve. And this is unusually helpful. It establishes your grandfather's intent and explicitly excludes your mother. Juries and judges like intent, so do banks. For the first time since the porch, I felt the ground go solid under me. I asked him whether we could lead with a demand and give them the chance to make it right before it became a criminal case. Whether it stays civil depends entirely on how they respond, Tom said. Good, I thought. I will give them the chance. More of a chance than they gave me on a porch in the snow. But the choice would be theirs in writing on the record. And within days, the credit union's fraud department reached out to verify activity, and the moment my mother got a call from the bank instead of a call from me, the temperature changed. The first text from her was ice. I don't know what you've started, but you need to stop it immediately. I did not answer. The next one, a day later, had a crack in it. Rachel, the bank called me. Whatever you think you saw, it is not what it looks like. We need to talk before you do something you'll regret. Still I did not answer. I had learned finally that answering my mother was how she got her hooks in. Every conversation was a door she could walk through. The statements could not be argued with. My silence could not be twisted. So I let the paper do the talking and kept my mouth shut. And it drove her to a fury I had never seen, because for the first time in my life, she could not manage me. Cody found me in the hospital parking lot after a shift, tracking me down to deliver a message from my mother. He was a mess, angry and scared and trying to be intimidating, which has never been Cody's strong suit. "What are you doing to Mom?" he said. "She's freaking out. You're trying to send her to jail over money." I leaned against my car, still in my scrubs, too tired for theatre. "Cody," I said, "do you know where the money for your truck came from? Your apartment deposit? The debts that disappeared?" He opened his mouth and closed it. In that pause I saw that some part of him knew, or had chosen not to know, which is its own kind of knowing. "Mom said it was family money," he finally said, weaker now. "She said it was an account that was kind of all of ours. Family money." There it was, the phrase she had used to launder it in her own mind and in his. "It was an account our grandfather put in my name, Cody," I said. "Just mine." He left me a note telling me to keep it away from her because she would spend it. And she spent it. On you. I watched that land. Cody is not cruel. He has just been the favourite so long he never asked what the favouritism cost, or who paid for it. "I didn't know," he said, and I think it was even true. "I didn't ask." "No," I said. "You didn't. That's the whole problem with being the one they protect. You never have to ask where it comes from." He stood in the cold parking lot, looking younger than 28, and for the first time I felt something other than envy toward my brother. I felt sorry for him. He had been bought with my money and never even knew the price. When threats did not work and Cody did not work, my mother reached for the oldest tool in her kit. She called, and for once I picked up, because Tom had advised me that a documented attempt to resolve things could only help me. Her voice was soft and wounded and maternal. "Rachel, sweetheart, I think this has all gotten so out of hand. Are you really going to send your own mother to prison over money your grandfather basically meant for the whole family anyway, after everything your father and I have done for you?" I let the silence stretch. Then I said evenly, "Grandpa didn't mean it for the family, Mum. He put it in my name and he left me a note about you specifically." A sharp little intake of breath. She had not known about the note. "I don't want you in prison," I went on, which was true. "I want my money back. Every dollar you took after he died. You have a chance to make this right before it goes any further. That's more of a chance than you gave me." She switched instantly from tears to ice. "After everything, you're choosing money over your family." And I almost laughed, because there it was, the projection so perfect it was almost art. "No, Mum," I said. "You did that 6 years ago. I'm just the one who finally noticed." And I hung up gently while she was still talking, and sat with my own steady heartbeat, and realised I was not afraid of her anymore. You stop being afraid of someone the day you can see the whole trick. My father called me the night before the family dinner my mother had arranged, and it is the closest any of them came to something like grace. He is a quiet man, conflict-shy to the point of cowardice, and he had spent the whole crisis exactly where he spends every crisis, in the den with the door closed. But that night he called, and his voice was rough. "Rachel, I knew." It came out of him in pieces. He had known my mother was taking from the account. He had told himself it was borrowing. That she would pay it back. That it was not his business to police his wife. He had watched her tell me at the funeral that there was nothing. And he had said nothing, because saying something would have meant a fight, and my father would rather lose a daughter than have a fight. "I should have told you years ago." "I let it happen. I let her put you out in the snow. I'm so ashamed. I believed him. And it hurt more than my mother's threats, because his was the cowardice of a man who loved me and still would not move." "Dad," I said gently, "thank you for telling me. I mean that." Then I said the hard part. "But I'm not stopping. The money is mine and I'm getting it back. And I'm not going to pretend at that dinner tomorrow that this didn't happen." He was quiet for a long moment. "I know," he said. "I just wanted you to hear once that you were right. You were always the strong one. We used that against you. I used it against you. It was not enough. But it was true. And it was the first true thing anyone in that house had said to me in years." The family dinner was set for the first Sunday of the new year at my parents' house, and my mother had stacked the room with aunts, uncles, and cousins, the same audience that had watched me get narrated down at Christmas. I understood exactly what she was doing. It was the move she had run my entire life: surround me with relatives, frame me as the greedy, vengeful daughter dragging the family through the mud, and apply enough collective pressure that I would back down just to make the discomfort stop. She wanted me outnumbered. She wanted a jury she had already bribed with her version of the story. The old me would have walked into that room and folded, but I was not bringing the old me. I was bringing a folder. Tom had prepared a clean packet, copies of the key statements, the timeline, the legal summary, and a copy of Pop Leo's note. I put it in a plain envelope, drove to the house I had been thrown out of 2 weeks earlier, walked up the porch steps past the door that had been locked against me, and let myself into my mother's ambush, carrying the one thing she had no answer for: the truth in writing. The living room was full and the air was already arranged against me. My mother sat in the centre of the couch like a woman holding court. My father beside her staring at his hands, Cody and his fiancée off to the side, and a half-circle of relatives in the good chairs holding cups of coffee and preloaded opinions. My mother started before I had even sat down. "Thank you all for coming. I didn't want to do this so publicly, but I think Rachel needs to hear from the whole family. Rachel has decided, over some misunderstanding about Grandpa's old accounts, to accuse me, her own mother, of stealing. She's gone to lawyers, to the bank. She's trying to have me charged with a crime." A murmur went around the room, the soft, disapproving sound of people who had been told one side. An aunt shook her head at me. "We took her in," my mother continued, gaining steam. "We let her live here when she had nowhere to go, and this is how she repays us. That girl is desperate and she can't do anything on her own. So now she's inventing a story to take money she didn't earn." There it was, the whole strategy in one breath. The eviction rewritten as charity, the theft rewritten as my fantasy, the word desperate deployed one more time to make me small. I felt the old pull, the lifelong urge to shrink, to apologise, to make the discomfort go away by disappearing. The whole room was leaning into her story. And then I felt the envelope in my hand, and I remembered that I had spent 14 years carrying my grandfather's warning without reading it. And I was done being the only person at this table who did not get to finish a sentence. I did not raise my voice. I just said, "Can I show everyone something?" And I opened the envelope. I laid the pages on the coffee table one at a time so everyone could see. "This is a bank statement," I said, calm as a vital signs report, "for an account my grandfather opened in my name when I was 18. "Only my name." I set down the next page. "These are the withdrawals and transfers out of it. Dozens of them over years. Every single one goes to an account belonging to my mother. I never authorised a single one." A few of the aunts leaned in despite themselves. Mom told me at Grandpa's funeral that he left nothing, that there was no account. She said that so I'd never look. I set down the timeline and put my finger on a date. "This is the day Grandpa died. A power of attorney ends the moment a person dies. That is the law in every state. Every transfer my mother made after this date came out of my account with no authority at all. My lawyer calls it conversion. The bank calls it fraud, and they have already started reversing it." The room had gone completely quiet. My mother's face was doing something I had never seen it do before, cracking. And then I laid down the last page, a copy of a soft yellow napkin, and I read it aloud, steadily, in the voice I used to deliver news in a trauma bay. "For when you have to stand on your own." "This is yours, Rachel." "Nobody else's. Don't tell your mother because she'll spend it. Some people love you and steal from you in the same breath. I looked up. He knew. 6 years before any of this, my own grandfather knew what she would do. That was when my mother came up off the couch screaming. She was shaking, pointing, her composure gone completely. That money was for this family. After everything I did for you, you'd humiliate me in my own home over money your grandfather would have wanted us to have. She was screaming, and the whole room was staring at her now instead of me, because a woman who has been wronged does not scream like that. A woman who has been caught does. I stayed in my chair and I kept my voice low. Grandpa knew you'd say that, Mum. He wrote it on a napkin when I was 18. And the room, finally, was silent enough to hear the truth in it. Then my Uncle Ray, my mother's own brother, reached down and picked up the timeline and the bank statement and read them slowly, the way a careful man reads. He looked at the date of my grandfather's death. He looked at the transfers that came after it. And he set the pages down and said into the silence, not to me but to the whole room, she's not the one who couldn't take care of herself. The word my mother had hung on me my whole life, desperate, helpless, can't do anything on her own, drifted across the room and settled at last on the person it actually fit. Cody made a weak sound of protest, but then his eyes caught one of the transfer lines, a date he recognised, the month of his truck, and his own name was nowhere on the document. The timing told him everything, and he stopped. My mother looked around the room for her audience and found it gone. The aunts who had shaken their heads at me were now looking at her, at the screaming woman standing over a coffee table full of proof. The story she had told had simply evaporated in the face of paper. She turned to me one last time, grasping, and reached for the weapon that had always worked. "You can't do this," she said. "You can't do anything on your own." And I stood up, and I looked my mother in the eye, and I gave her sentence back to her with the only correction it had ever needed. "I did all of this on my own, Mum, including catching you." My father put his face in his hands. Nobody in that room ever called me desperate again. Before I left that room, I told them plainly where things stood, the way you tell a family a prognosis, steadily and without drama. Here's what happens now. The bank is reversing what it can. My lawyer sent Mum a letter with the rest of what she owes me, and a plan to pay it back. If she signs it and makes it right, I'm not asking for anyone to be arrested. I don't want my mother in prison. I want what my grandfather left me, which was always mine. But I'm not dropping the claim so this can be buried. It happened. It's written down now, and it does not get erased to keep the peace. I looked at her one final time. I'm not going to be in this family's life the way I was. I won't be the strong one you lean on while you call me the weak one. That's over. If any of you want a real relationship with me, the door is open, but it's my door now, and it locks from my side too. Then I walked out. I was the first one to leave, which I had never been in my life. Always the last, always cleaning up, always making sure everyone else was settled before I moved. I walked down the porch steps past the door that had been locked against me on Christmas, and I got in my car and drove to the motel that had become more of a home than that house ever was. Here is how it settled in the months that followed. The credit union reversed the transactions that qualified, and a good portion of my money came back that way, quietly, line by line, a ledger being made honest. For the rest, my mother faced a simple choice her lawyer surely explained plainly. Sign the repayment agreement and avoid criminal exposure, or fight it and risk a fraud charge with a paper trail a first-year prosecutor could win. She signed. Of course she signed. People who count on never being caught fold fast once they are. The repayment plan is not fast and not comfortable for her, and some of it I may never fully see. But most of what was mine came home, and more importantly, it came home labelled correctly. Recovered, not given, not borrowed, recovered. I moved into my apartment in February, the one I had been saving toward the whole time, and furnished it slowly with my own paychecks, and there is a particular peace in a home that nobody can lock you out of. Cody called me a few weeks after the dinner, not to argue, just to say he had been thinking and that he was sorry he never asked where things came from. He is pulling back from our mother's orbit now, getting his own footing, and I think some part of him is quietly relieved to find out he might be capable of standing on his own too. My father and I talk sometimes. He came and helped me move a couch into the apartment, and we did not say much, and that was its own kind of apology, the only kind he has. My mother and I do not speak. She has never once said she was sorry in a way that was not actually about herself, and I have stopped waiting for it. I keep Pop Leo's napkin in a frame on the wall of my own kitchen now, the soft yellow paper and the careful slanted print. For when you have to stand on your own. I read it some mornings with my coffee. He gave me money, yes, and it mattered. But that was never the real gift. The real gift was that one person in my life saw exactly who I was and exactly who my mother was, and trusted me to figure it out before it was too late. I figured it out. A little late, but I figured it out on my own. The people who keep telling you that you are helpless are very often the ones counting on you never checking the balance. They locked the door and called me desperate. They had no idea the card in my purse had been waiting 14 years to answer them.